Hello and welcome to Cafe DC. I'm Faiz Rahman, and our guest today is, this time we actually have a very unique person, the acting chief executive and president of Interaction. And rather than me defining this organization, I would let you shed some light on what's this organization about and what's the idea behind Interaction. Lindsay, please.
Faiz, thank you so much for having me today. I'm very excited to talk about Interaction and its work. Fundamentally, it's about civil society actors coming together to have greater impact and greater effectiveness in the world. So my organization is an alliance of about 185 nonprofits that are based in the U.S. that focus on addressing issues of human poverty and human dignity outside the U.S. So our members are many large organizations that you would know, like Save the Children or World Vision, and then a lot of smaller organizations that you might not have heard of. But they're all united in this purpose of advancing human dignity. About 40% of our members are faith-based, and when I say faith-based, I mean Hindus, Muslims, Jews, all the Protestant denominations, the Catholics. It's a very ecumenical, broad American movement that's focused on human well-being.
Very good. You said we have about 185 members of this group, and they have to be based in the United States, right? Foreign organizations, foreign NGOs cannot be a member.
We recently modified our bylaws to permit organizations from outside the U.S. to be members, but it's also important to note that the kind of organization that Interaction is exists in other countries. So we work very closely with an Indian-based organization called Vani that serves a similar purpose for organizations that are working in India.
Lindsay, let's talk about the importance of this work. Of course, Interaction is a very important organization, different idea rather than just being an organization yourself. You form an alliance and then try to support those organizations, the member organizations. And you set the standard in the industry, so to speak, in the nonprofit, what you call the field, right? But why it's so important for a civil society, or for any society for that matter, to have this non-governmental work at any stage or at any level? What purpose do they serve?
It's really, really critical. I mean, we tend to think of the government sector as being one thing and the media as being something else, but citizen voice in supporting and driving social change, I think, is really critical to the advancement of any society. And an organization such as ours supports NGOs that are driving toward that purpose. So it's very important for organizations to have standards for transparency and accountability for themselves internally, because they're turning around and holding governments to be transparent and accountable. So for example, our member organizations publish their funding to an international standard called the International Aid Transparency Initiative. So we publish information about where our money goes and how we spend it. At the same time, as an alliance, our organizations are on Capitol Hill pushing the U.S. government to be transparent about how it spends on foreign aid. So it's, if you're going to take on government as someone that you want to hold accountable, you need to be also holding yourself to a high standard of effectiveness.
The reason I asked this question, the importance of NGO work, because on a socio-political level, in lots of societies, in other countries, you see people looking up to the governments for all their miseries and ills and needs and wants, and they want somebody to come and help them out from. And to an extent, it's true, because those are the only established institutions, the governmental organizations. But during this discussion, I also want to emphasize that the governments are there, yes, but at the same time, the civil society has to create these other groups who can fulfill other needs of the common man. like removing poverty, giving them opportunity. The governments cannot do everything and anything, or maybe misspoke. They cannot do everything. Period. Yeah.
Well, it's fascinating because if you just want to take the U.S. as an example, I mean, so much of the program delivery for people who are poor in the U.S. happens through local civil society organizations. Churches and other entities, food banks, all those kinds of things are typically funded both by donations from the public and by donations from corporations and by donations from government. So I think if you think of civil society as the place where we all act for the common good, everyone has a role in that. Government has a role in that. Corporate sector has a role. But I think civil society has a unique and powerful role as organizing and facilitating citizen voice, and also creating a feedback loop in terms of what do citizens really need, what do they really want, what's going to change their society. And that organized voice, to be effective, I think needs to hold itself to high standards of accountability and transparency for their own work.
So what are the criteria that you judge and make those organizations your member? How do they qualify to become your members?
So we have a whole set of standards. If you go to www.interaction.org, you can see all of them. But basically they fall into several categories. There are categories about good governance. So is the way that your organization is the way your board is set up, the way your management is chosen, is that done in compliance, in this case, with the laws of the U.S.? And then there are a set of standards around how you talk to the media. So are you truthful? Do you not use images and ideas that exploit people or reduce their dignity? So that's another set of issues. There's another set of issues around non-discrimination in delivery of services. So you can't go into a country and say that you're going to deliver services only to people of your faith. If you're an Interaction member, you do services for whoever is in need in that community, wherever it is you're working. And then there are also standards that relate to program effectiveness. So do you track, do you track how well your program is delivering against your objectives? Are you correctly valuing gifts in kind? So there's a lot of technical things around program that you have to meet standards for.
Okay, so a big question for several NGOs is how much do they spend on administrative cost and actual, rather than helping the people out? It sounds to me that they would be increasing their administrative and management cost if they were to become your members, because then there's so much back and forth and so many reports. So, I mean, do you think, have you heard this before, that why would they spend so much time and money on qualifying to be your member?
That's a great question, and I think that, and it's a very fair question, but I think that the most of our standards involve things that are legal rules that members already have to comply with. So a fair amount of what is in the standards are legal standards that they already have to meet. And so by being an Interaction member, you're essentially making a public pledge that you are going to hold yourself to the highest standards. And what we get from our members is actually those standards make them more effective. So if you have a properly run organization, if you set it up right in the first place, then you spend less on running the organization itself if you're meeting those best practice standards. It's not unusual to find that Interaction member organizations, in addition to having the Interaction seal on their website, will also have the highest number of stars from Charity Navigator or from the Better Business Bureau. But our standards are important because they get to program and service delivery, which some of those other standards regimes don't get to.
You already touched upon this. My next question was going to be, are there any testimonials, any feedback that you receive from these member organizations, and does it make it worth their while that, yes, they want to be your members?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's very interesting. We had a member organization that I will not name that was in the news about 5 years ago for some less than good practices. And at that time, they were not a member. But they got a lot of negative press because they had nepotism on their board, and they had exorbitant salaries, and so they had a lot of negative press around that. And their donations from the public that supported them fell off because of that loss of credibility. The organization joined Interaction about 2 years ago, and had to meet all those standards, had to certify that they had changed all of their practices, and is now an organization that is very stable and doing very well and is regaining support because they've been able to improve their public image and their public integrity. So generally, members are very proud of being members, and I think it's because of the sort of professional core that it creates. I think the other thing it does is members advance a common agenda, a common political agenda. And so if you're in the room with other organizations that are serious in terms of their own service delivery and their own program impact, in their own good governance, then that sort of creates trust to move an agenda forward together.
Can you name a few top members or well-known members?
Oh, yeah. We have lots of them. I mean, Save the Children, World Vision, Oxfam, Habitat for Humanity.
Jimmy Carter's organization.
Yeah, we've got a lot. Like I said, a lot of faith-based organizations. Islamic Relief is a member. Catholic Relief Services is a member organization. So there are a lot of large ones, and then, like I said, a lot of smaller ones that you don't necessarily know, but are working very targeted. There's a Cook Stoves Alliance. Secretary Hillary Clinton was very interested in the impact that Cook Stoves in closed spaces had on women, and so the Cook Stoves Alliance, which promotes the use of that technology, joined. So we have a lot of niche organizations that are doing really useful, important work, and it creates a real synergy of groups that are all caring about the same things.
So I'm positive these standards that you promote among your membership, you also follow those standards very strictly, right?
Right.
And on this note, we'll take a short break, and we'll be back after this short break. Please stay with us. Thank you.
There's an African proverb that it says that if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. I'm a big going far and going together person.
Welcome back. I'm Faiz Rahman and you're watching Cafe DC. Our guest today is Lindsay Coates, and we'll talk to her about your organization and its structure now. So you've been the acting CEO and president of this group for about 3 months, I suppose. So who was the chief before you, and how did you end up here in this position?
So our CEO, Sam Worthington, is currently on a sabbatical. He'll return very shortly, and so I will have to go back to being the executive vice president. But I have really enjoyed being the CEO of this organization. I'm very proud of the work that our members do. I'm a big believer in the importance of civil society organizations, and I hope that the organization will benefit from what I've learned by being the acting role, because that really changes how you look at what's happening within the organization and externally.
And you'll probably have a better perspective when you go back to your regular job.
Absolutely. Right. I feel like I've learned a lot. And I also feel that it's very important. I'm the mother of 2 daughters. I have many nieces. I think it's very important for women to hold leadership roles. And
I have 2 daughters, and I feel the same way about them, at least.
So I think that that I feel an obligation to my gender to sort of take the leadership opportunities when they're presented, because I think that we're all richer the more diverse our leadership in any organization is.
Great. Let's say, I mean, when you look at this society, the American society, I mean, of course, it's a very diverse country, not just ethnically, languages, cultures, But you see these the economic activities, so to speak. People choose careers not just based on money and prestige for several reasons, and rightly so. A lot of people, they go to these non-profit careers and make good names for themselves and also serve the humanity. This has not been the case in some of the countries overseas. There are some very well-defined careers for the kids, either doctors and engineers, and then they just, not many people think to opt for these careers. What's the reason why people choose so many different diverse careers in the society, and why NGO and the nonprofit work is such a big, huge opportunity for some young people here?
Americans are, I think, very interested in their communities for all the sort of the negative stuff that you hear and all the difficult things that happen in this country. I think at core there is a real need to serve other people. And when I advise young people who are thinking about joining our sector, it's a matter of finding what are you personally really passionate about and good at. Because if you're going to do essentially social good or social change work, you're going to have to stick with it for the long haul. And if you're doing something just in terms of the work itself that's not meaningful to you or you're not good at, you won't be able to stick it out. But I do think that desire to improve the world is not uniquely American. I see it all over the place with our international partners. But I think the thing that helps it here is we have a legal and regulatory framework that encourages the existence of these kinds of organizations, and we have a long history of partnering of nonprofits, government, and the corporate sector so that people can see the possibilities in that kind of work.
Exactly. I mean, that's exactly what I was trying to point out to, that here you see lots of economic opportunities even in the nonprofit sector. People in other countries, I mean, for example, in your case, you're a very successful lady, in your own way. You have, good platform to make your message and your, whatever you believe, your beliefs understood across the oceans, so to speak. But in lots of other countries, the opportunities in this sector aren't that high, sound, or guaranteed.
Right.
People do it, of course, as you rightly said. I mean, there is just not uniquely American tradition, but they do it at their own peril, so to speak, and great personal risk. They go and join these nonprofit organizations.
That's absolutely true.
Yeah. So since we're talking about kids and challenges and your message, millennials, through your interaction with some of the youth, what do you think is going on? Because right now we see, I have 3 kids, 2 in college already and 1 in high school. So I see this great desire to serve and be their own person. They don't want to just listen to their parents just because we want them to be financially secure and successful. But what I tell them, that there's a difference between hobbies and occupations. Yes, a passion. Yours to serve in a nonprofit sector may be your passion, but it may not be your occupation. So do you see this distinction? Maybe we are saying the right things to these millennials?
No, I think it's really interesting. I think that I think of civil society as the space where we all act for the common good. So if you think about that, all of us are acting for the common good in civil society. So the businessman, for example, who is active in his church, who does charitable work, in my mind is as important to making that work as someone like me, where my whole professional life has been in that sector. So I think a lot of it is finding out sort of where you can have what you are most satisfied doing, because you're going to be doing it for the long haul, and then finding out where you contribute the most. I also have friends who describe working in the nonprofit sector as a vocation, a calling. And people who feel that way, I'm grateful that we live in a society that will support that. But just because you do not feel that calling doesn't mean you're not going to contribute to the good of your society. So a strong civil society really depends on everybody playing roles that are suited to what they can bring to that work.
Very good. And you said you started your work in this line as a civil rights activist?
Yeah, in Mississippi. I went to law school at the University of Mississippi. And I wasn't sure exactly.
So you're from deep south, so to speak?
Yeah. So, and I wasn't sure exactly what I was going to do. I'd studied international relations as an undergraduate, but then I started looking at and becoming more aware and informed about some of the challenges in my own country, and became very interested in using the law as an instrument to address issues of social justice. Unfortunately, not unfortunately, the law in the U.S. is a very status quo thing. It will perpetuate the status quo. And I found after about 10 years that I was much more interested in sort of advocating for bigger systemic change.
But quite a few lawyers have done that, by the way. I mean, even if you look at the civil rights movement itself, lots of these lawyers, very prominent ones, they chose to work with that movement. And even today, I mean, a lot of noble and important civic work is being done by these lawyers.
Absolutely. But it goes back to that point of sort of what are you good at? So I was a good lawyer. I like practicing law. I was a good lawyer, but I really like organizing a group of people toward a common goal. And law practice doesn't really doesn't allow that. You operate within a system, and so people like, I revere Thurgood Marshall. Just revere him. He was a Supreme Court justice, first African American Supreme Court justice, one of my personal heroes. Worked for the NAACP, a civil society organization in the U.S., long before he went to the bench. And I think that that's one model of how you make change. In this country, we also needed Martin Luther King Jr. and the churches and all of those people organizing. And at the same time, we needed the young people who would sit at the lunch counter and have ketchup poured over their heads. To build social change, you need a lot of different people who are engaged in that process. And people will bring different strengths and gifts to that work. And if you are motivated to work in that sector, you need to find what's your strength, what's your gift, what can you give back, and proceed accordingly.
Very good. And so to be a very effective and good non-profit activist and worker, I think you have to be non-partisan, right? I mean, you have to be appealing and attractive to everyone in the society. Lately, we have seen some polarization on the political level when it comes to issues on poverty, taxes, welfare programs, assistance, affirmative action. I mean, these are some of the very big political issues that also affect the grassroots and the civil society. So how do you basically deal and tackle those issues? With those issues? Yeah.
That's such a great question. I think the way I personally tend to think about it is you need to be clear about your principles, like what do you want to achieve, and honest and transparent about that, but wise about your tactics. So be smart about who you partner with. Bring along the biggest tent that you can. I love, there's an African proverb that it says that if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. I'm a big going far and going together person. So I think if we can agree, I can see, scenarios in life where a corporation or a government or a nonprofit could get together on a particular issue. Like we have an initiative called 1,000 Days, which is about early childhood nutrition. And 1,000 Days brings together the U.S. government, the corporate sector, country governments, and NGOs to work on interventions for early childhood nutrition. So we're all agreed on the principle that children need to get the best access they can get to nutrition, and we all bring different tactics to that. So that's the way I think about it, because I think most people of goodwill can agree on the principles that they want to achieve. And if you can be creative about your tactics, you're going to get better results.
Lindsay, of course, thank you very much for being on the show.
My pleasure.
It's a pleasure having you here. Great wisdom, great input. Appreciate it. Thank you very much for watching Cafe DC. I'm Faiz Rahman. See you next week.